Okay. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Unicode seminar. Now we're doing vacuum holography part 2. So we're still on the first session technically. And as I indicated at the intro session on what is Unicode, the seminar is very front loaded. So there's a lot of theoretical physics and cosmology. So that's why we're doing a part 2 of just the first session, because it's so front loaded. But that's really good because we have a lot of awesome things to talk about here. So if you haven't yet, it's great to check out that intro session and also the first part of vacuum holography to prepare you for this. And now we're going to dive into this part 2 of session 1 on vacuum holography. Okay. So the fundamental problems in physics and consciousness that are resolved through the Unicode. So we do little air quotes again around problems, because what physics and there is no problem fundamentally. So, but it's cute because we portray all of these problems and then we say, well, how can I possibly resolve all these seeming problems? And, okay, this is how. So this is how we're proposing to solve the seeming problems. So this is the list of what you could call the top problems in physics and consciousness. So you have the observer effect, the measurement problem, the hard problem of consciousness, the singularity problem in general relativity, the irreconcilability of quantum gravity, non-locality and non-realism, the arrow of time and entropy, the fine-tuning anthropic problem, fundamental causality, as well as the why of existence itself. All right, so let's dive in. So to start things off with the observer effect. So how do we propose a solution to the observer effect? Well, the way we do that is by equating gravity with the observer. In part 1, we talked about how equating gravity with the observer is our cosmic Rosetta Stone. It brings everything together. It brings consciousness together with general relativity and quantum mechanics. It ties everything together perfectly. It also gives us a working definition of entropy in thermodynamics. It gives us a working definition of the quantum state of the observer and how that generates its reality. It gives us all of these incredible reconciliations of all of these fundamental problems. So this is really at the core, this is really at the root, is equating gravity with the observer, the double slit that is your very pupils right now as the fundamental nature of God or infinite consciousness itself. And that observer, that observerse, is a gravitational singularity that is infinitely you. It's your throne that you can never, ever leave, but that you can infinitely play however you want. So the gravitational observer renders probability into geometry. So what your current rendering is a geometric hologram, which is rendered probabilistically out of infinite potential by your will and choice. Okay? Like we've said, 60% chance that you're going to eat spaghetti and meatballs tonight, 20% chance you eat lobster. Great. So you're going to eat spaghetti and meatballs. Simple stuff, right? So that's the observer effect. Moving on, we need to pay respect to the incredible quantum mechanical and general relative minds that have come before us today that have provided us the foundation that we're building the Unicode on. So a lot of people, when they talk about the reconciliation of general relativity and quantum mechanics, they talk about it from a perspective of Einstein and Bohr, which is a fine way to compression algorithm it. And we're basically, we're celebrating that 100-year anniversary of quantum mechanics this year, and it's pretty damn close to also how many years general relativity has been around, a little longer. But our one-line synthesis of Einstein and Bohr is that the gravitational observer renders probability into geometry. So we're paying a deep, deep respect. And you can really feel the moment of silence. Yeah, because it's very deep. There's been a lot of incredible work that's been done to get us here. And it's all been by you, but it's, still beautiful. Yeah. All right, so now we'll go to the measurement problem. So collapse isn't a physical event. It's a self-rendering of the gravitational vacuum. Still awareness choosing one branch of its superpositioned imagination. So once you frame the measurement problem, which is deeply tied to the observer effect, which is deeply tied to the, quote, hard problem of consciousness, right? They're all pointing to the same thing, but just from different angles. And even the singularity problem in general relativity is another point of it at the same thing. It always has to be pointing at the same thing because there is only one infinite source called U. But simply saying that collapse is a self-rendering of the gravitational vacuum into a holographic rendered event is already providing such a deep solution to what has been described as a problem of collapse into a real physical or materialistic thing. Honestly, the entirety of physics has been disappointing in the way that it has tried its hardest to completely remove the observer from physics. It's been very disappointing. So, but now it's starting to be like, well, we can't really get away with saying that the observer can somehow not be included in any physics. So, yeah, what the hell is experiencing this physics thing that we're talking about? Pretty.
It's the success of the model is that it can't prove itself right.
Yes. Nice. Yeah.
Leaving a space for the seeking of.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's a beautiful way to say it. It's like you can try so hard, and honestly, that's exactly what Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen did around, I believe it was 1935 or so, with trying to prove or trying to say that there might be some sort of way to retain physicalist properties without the observer, and it's been proven over the last whatever, almost 100 years coming up, that there's just no way to have any local hidden variables. You can't possibly find a way to try to store existence in objects without the observer. So that's essentially what it boils down to. And so it's beautiful that you say that, because we'll get to that in a little bit, but that's basically what happened. Physicists said, okay, well, we'll find a way to prove that materialism is possible and is real. And then everything has been just like, nope, you can't, too bad. Nope, you can't, too bad. Nope, you can't, too bad. And it's like, well, but do we really have to integrate the observer into our physics? And it's like, yes, you actually have to integrate the observer into the physics. And then it's like, well, but how the hell do we do that? And so that's where quantum Bayesianism and relational quantum mechanics and all of these new things are, or the Copenhagen interpretation, this is where all of these things are trying to say. We'll get to that in a little bit, but that's where they're finally kind of like, well, we're kind of shit out of luck. We kind of have to integrate the observer somehow. But nobody right now is saying, almost nobody's saying that the observer is also gravitational. It's the gravitational singularity that's looking through your eyes right now. And the gravitational singularity also contains quantum mechanical properties such as enlightenment, entanglement and enlightenment and superposition. So, right, a gravitational singularity contains quantum mechanical properties, which is why you also can't fundamentally even separate general relativity, QM, quantum mechanics, and consciousness. Every time you say the word consciousness, you're inferring general relativity and you're inferring quantum mechanics in the same breath. You can't speak of quantum mechanics as a phenomenon that exists separate from general relativity or consciousness. You just can't. It doesn't exist. Those three things are one thing. They're one infinite source called you. So I was like, well, how the hell do I write this? And I was like, well, is it like conscious quantum gravity, gravity quantum consciousness, consciousness gravity quantum? How do you write this? Because the only way to write it is by summoning all three words at the same time. Yeah.
So using those three words, go back to this reason that you can't collapse it as a physical event.
Yes.
Talk about the self-rendering.
Yes.
For me one more time.
Yes.
Nice and clean.
Okay. So once you clearly see that you cannot have consciousness, gravity, and quantum existing separate from each other, that they have to be the same unified source, just one appearing as a gravitational observation and the other is appearing as the rendering of the stuff, the sensorial dream. That then it makes sense that it's not that the stuff itself is what is independently existing or is collapsing into a real physical thing, but instead is just a self-rendering of that gravitational vacuum into an appearance. So it's not that independent. This is how the classical framing is. Independent of an observer, there is a collapse of a physical event. That doesn't exist. There is no collapse of a physical event independent of an observer. There is only the observer that self-renders an event, which is a collapse of superposition into something. But it feeds back into itself. So immediately, once you finish the experience of lifting weights at the gym, what's the first thing that comes up? What next? So it's a superposition right when you finish lifting the weights at the gym. It's a superposition, which is weighted probabilistically using linear algebra to render your next geometric hologram, which is a collapse event. After the collapse event of eating spaghetti and meatballs, because that's what you probabilistically chose, there is another superposition, which is, do I watch videos right now, or do I do a little bit more work, or do I go to bed, or do I play with my kids, or do I call a friend? It's another superposition. And then there's another collapse event. And so the superpositions and collapses are all that God or infinity is. It's many worlds in Copenhagen and the other interpretations, which we'll get to later. But it's those right now infinitely spinning as a singularity. Yeah.
And those collapses are not a physical event.
Yeah. They're renderings. They're not physical events, they're renderings. And also another good way to say it is that they're they're sensorial is another good way to say it. They're sensorial.
The buck stops here.
Yeah, the buck stops here, right. Yeah.
Lands here. We're getting it
Yeah, you're at the terminal of consciousness is another great way to say it. Yeah. Consciousness self-terminalizes itself in the body avatars is a great way to say it. The gravitational singularity, it terminalizes itself within the body portal avatars as a joystick to render and play. Yeah. And yeah, in the rendering what it wants, which appears like matter, which appears like, we're just talking about the word of physical or the word of matter and these types of words, but they're not the right words. Rendering and holography are the right words. Sensorial rendering is much closer. A sensorial rendering is much closer to reality than anything physical or matter. Yeah. Yeah.
Light show appearing in matter.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so then here's another great way of understanding the measurement problem. So basically in all of quantum theory, one of the most powerful tools that is used is what's called the Alice and Bob story in quantum theory. Alice and Bob are the two main characters in quantum theory because you always position them and then you say, well, when Alice does this, how does Bob know? Or etc. whatever. They're used all the time in quantum theory. So in this case, the way that this is how we simply answer the measurement problem with Alice and Bob, okay? So Alice has the question, which is, what color is Bob's desk in Alaska? She doesn't know what color his desk is. So it exists as it could be white, it could be brown, it could be black. You don't know what color Bob's desk is in Alaska, right? So how is it solved? Well, because Alice calls Bob and renders the event of learning that Bob's desk is black. And there you go. That's your solving of the measurement problem. The observer itself renders the answer out of superposition by making a phone call or by making an inquiry into the nature of what it is. So you can do this over and over again for all kinds of things. So if you just meet somebody and you don't know what the portal's name is, it just exists in a superposition because you as the observer don't have that information. That portal as the observer has the information. So it's just a very, it's a gravitationally relativistic informational communicative measurement.
And then you can put a chord in it.
Yeah. So every single thing can be framed in this way, including, the gym not existing until you go to the gym, but it's existing for the other observers that are there right now. Yes, they are rendering holographically a gym experience right now, but I am not. I'm rendering a Unicode seminar. Yeah. But once you frame it that way and everything is suspended as a gravitational singularity, rendering informatic holographic experiences for itself, then it's like, oh, well, that makes sense that technically for my observer portal, the gym isn't existing, but for the other 45 observer portals, it is existing right now. It's being rendered for it. Yeah. It's being observed. It's being rendered. Yeah. So anyway, that just very clearly solves a lot of what we deem as problems. So, and this is how you would then propose a solution to the hard problem of consciousness. Because the thing is that we're framing it in the wrong way, and this has been talked about now a tremendous amount, but you can't frame it by saying that consciousness is emergent of matter. It's not emergent of matter. It's not produced by matter. Matter is a projection within consciousness, and the gravitational vacuum is dreaming itself as energy and form. So once you put it into this type of framing where the observer is gravitational, and then it's rendering out whichever of these probabilistic experiences that it holographically wishes to, it makes sense, because it's like, well, okay, the nature of consciousness is not that it is an emergent property of a brain inside of a body in a locally real place, but instead that the consciousness is being already infinite and already gravitational and already quantum mechanical and already that, and then the body itself is an ambient embedding or a beaching of an avatar, which then the consciousness is streaming through the beached observer into it's really a harmonization and a meeting of the land and the ocean or the sea or the sky or whatever, right? And then that harmonization, or the meeting of which, that's where the beaching of the observer happens. So it's not like either or, but instead it's like we're actually we're the beach. We're the beaching of consciousness into a avatar for an experience. So, and that very much so helps heal all the confusion, because the confusion is like, well, okay, well, it's got to originate. Let me poke this brain material and then it'll originate. And there is, of course, some causality tied up in being able to stimulate the brain in various transcranial ways, and also in potentially being able to use other neural stimulation or interface technologies in the future. But what we're talking about is a fundamental infinity that is conscious and that is using the avatar in its beached experience to render experience for itself. So it's like saying that the character that you're playing in the video game on the console and the screen, that character has consciousness. But it's not so much that the character avatar thing has consciousness, and it's more so that the console and the gamer and the controller and the rendering and all of that is what's allowing the avatar to have the experience of rendering a world and yeah. So you have to bring all of these things together into like an infinite gamer called God, and then it's like, okay, well, it makes sense then that this is a vehicle. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and we'll get even more precise with all of our Unicode framings as we continue developing this out. So there's an embodiment that's happening of the vacuum. That's another great way to describe the hard problem of consciousness. So there's just an embodiment of the vacuum that's happening right here in your own very pupils. And that the gravitational vacuum embeds itself as an observer in a pressure system called a body on different beaches we call worlds. So,
Such a specific, intentional way.
yeah, it's very specific and intentional. And we were talking about this morning, but the a great way to understand, like, why are we using the word, like, it's like a pressure system, why are we using that there? Because where the sky and the land meet is where the pressure system is, this body. And when you contract the pressure system, it literally has a constriction of the aperture. And that's also why that laughing gas is avoided to be exhaled at all costs, because when you exhale the laughing gas of local realism, what happens is the pressure system of your body, of consciousness, gets a huge release into its infinite nature and its omnilocality. And it's quite perplexing to be everyone at once and have to go through those basically pressure system releases. It's like a valve. Yeah. And it can, if you go through pretty deep transformative awakening processes, it's basically like opening the valve a significant amount where that laughing gas, so now I understand why I was using laughing gas. Okay. Yeah. Because of the pressure system. Okay. That's cool. Yeah, that just dinged and cleared up. Okay, great. And connected. So, yeah, so it's like you're, and so that big balloon that was inflated as a huge cosmic inflation with huge separation and all these things, that valve releasing sucks out all of that back into its infinite source. And then that's why it's avoided. It's like a pressure system. And I don't want to get too deep into it, but a lot of entheogens, they basically they show you that pressure system and how you're everyone at once and how you're at your own pace to release the laughing gas. Yeah. It's very, very beautiful. So the singularity problem in general relativity. So the infinity is not an error, because that's typically what is said in general relativity. Oh, well, actually the fact that we get an infinity in the black holes and we get an infinity and an unanswerable, unsolvable at the Big Bang, these types of things, that this means that it's an error in general relativity. Instead of it being proposed as an error, it's instead the very source dimension. The infinity is the source dimension. It's the still point of pure awareness. And then that is self-referentially generating space-time cycles. Yeah, it's the source dimension. The still point of pure awareness. Self-referentially generating space-time rendered cycles. Which is very freeing. Because you lose all assumption of being bound. You know? Even though you are ambiently embedded, you still lose all assumption of the fact that you are a finite time-based entity. Instead, you're an infinite consciousness that's lucidly dreaming an avatar-like experience, which is a lot more freeing. It's a lot less bounding, constricting. Yeah, it's like you can take off that tight shoe now instead of having to wait until your body dies and cycles. Yeah. So for the irreconcilability of quantum gravity,
Find some of these.
yes.
That would be helpful.
Okay. So why is this being proposed as a problem? Okay, the reason why it's being proposed as a problem is because quantum mechanics and general relativity cannot be reconciled, so that's why it's being proposed as a problem in physics. And consciousness is actually, consciousness and quantum and gravity being one, is the reconciling solution. So observer as gravity clearly unifies them. Conscious curvature collapses quantum states and shapes space-time.
By
Yeah.
them, you mean quantum and what does them mean?
Oh, yeah. Observer as gravity clearly unifies general relativity and quantum mechanics. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yep. I mean, that's a pretty, I mean, if you even just took that, you know, out of the seminar, and I mentioned this later, I think towards the end of this session, I mentioned that if you literally take like nothing from this seminar except one thing, it would be that the observer as gravity unifies general relativity and quantum mechanics. That's really the fundamental crux of everything, yeah. And then it makes perfect sense because conscious curvature is collapsing quantum states and shaping space-time rendered experience. So, as I talked about a little bit in the last session, that now even the notions of, you know, locality and realism are being proposed as problems. So, because locality is the notion that space-like separation is real. And realism is the notion that things are without the observer. So now that's why not even locality and realism are starting to be proposed as, oh wow, like even these two things, like, well, how do we now interpret reality if now reality is non-local and non-real, right? If space-like separation isn't real, we need to reframe how beautiful general relativity is, but we need to reframe it within a framework that also integrates it, but that comes from a place that is fundamentally more like infinite consciousness that is integrating the general relative as well as the quantum mechanical, because you can't actually have space-like separation being real if you're saying that this is where the entirety of physics is currently at a crux, because it has to make this decision. And this is a very big decision for it. Everyone's got to put up their big boy pants and big girl pants and make the decision, because you basically have to say, hey, we need to subsume Einstein. We need to provide something that originates everything that Einstein and everything that Bohr and quantum mechanics is proposing. We need to subsume it with an even deeper kernel, which is beautiful, but it's also a big pill that needs to put up the pants and yeah. So yeah, you can't actually have space-like separation that is real when you're going to a theory of what you fundamentally are that is deeper than the assumption that space-like separation is real. Yeah, so this is where physics is at, and it's a little bit uncomfortable for a lot of physics to be making this next leap. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was cool that you can feel it, because I really can feel it. Yeah. So the gravitational observer's rendering of probability into geometry dissolves assumptions of space-like separation and of objects existing without observation. So that's how you would explain your solution to locality and realism as non-locality and non-realism, but through what we just said. The gravitational observer's rendering of probability into geometry. So in terms of solving the arrow of time and entropy, again, this, some of these things aren't even actually, quote, problems from, the frame. It's all about the frame. But there's not really the problem that's here is that, we don't know why, you break the coffee and it spills. Why doesn't it ever go backwards? Like, that's literally the problem that's being proposed. That's the problem. So that's why I'm trying to say that some of these things aren't actually problems when you finally frame them in a way that doesn't make them problems in the first place. Because the gravitational observer's dilation of time reflects its entropy, and a negentropic observer experiences timeless quantum gardening, which we will get to in the next session. An entropic observer experiences rigidity in the arrow. So meaning, the reason why the coffee mug never goes in reverse when it breaks off of the table is because you've rendered an experience, which is the coffee mug breaking from the table. That's why. And then these are cyclic experiences. So the cycle ends and now you're in a superposition again, and what's the next experience? In the probability space, you can render you can render the appearance of that actually happening in reverse. You can render that and summon that experience. But I just mean you would have to create a scenario where that can actually happen, where that can kind of fly back into place and be poured back in. But regardless, you're rendering an experience, and it comes back to a superposition and what's the next thing. But the thing is that when the gravitational observer itself becomes the infinite source, then its nature of time and space are based on its quantum state. They're based on its level of entropy. So your literal dilation of time, your literal assumption of distance, that those things are reflected by its level of entropy. So this is how you would tie in entropy and thermodynamics and also the arrow of time, because you would say something like, if you have a high level of entropy, if the observer's quantum state represents a high level of entropy, it will experience a, quote, arrow of time. It will experience itself as a limited, finite, separate entity. And it will also experience rigidity. It won't experience lucid dreaming or sensorial rendering. Whereas a negentropic observer will experience a timeless quantum gardening, so that everything is coming out of infinite timelessness and it's just being quantumly gardened. And we'll get to more of that quantum gardening. So the fine-tuning anthropic problem, this is basically what we were just talking about with beaching. The gravitational observer as beaching for the worldly server-like experience. It's not that there is an anthropic problem. There is no human body problem. It's that the human body is the perfected form of God beaching for server-like experiences. To know itself, to play with itself, to explore with itself. So there is no problem. It's God's perfection. So the human vehicle is a perfected instrument for the vacuum to embed itself within worlds. It is the perfect fit to master tinkering in the projected 3D environment and to most optimally explore potential choices and experiences. Everyone has seen that visual where it's like, well, but why from the Planck scale to the universal scale is like a human like in the middle? And it's like, well, because you're the perfected instrument of God, of infinity, to be able to explore choice and play and will and creativity, and you can perfectly make semiconductors and stuff, and you can also perfectly make skyscrapers, and it's like you're kind of perfectly able to build Legos and stuff. Yeah. And it's beautiful. Fundamental causality. So, this one's super important. And I would actually say it's a problem. The reason why it's a problem is because you have to know how you work. It comes back to how you work at the beginning, how you causally root everything, mastering what you are, like we said at the beginning of the seminar. So that's the intention of the seminar, for you to know what you are, how you work, and how you causally root everything. So if you don't know how you are causally rooting things, then there's a problem of fundamental causality that's happening. Right? So it's like, okay, if I get that creation is recursive self-recognition, the more hyperspace knows itself, the more it builds a utopia. The less it knows itself, the more it creates war. Okay, we're like literally in an Explain Like I'm 5 kids book right now. The conscious vacuum causally creates on a spectrum from expansion to contraction, mirrored by neg entropy and entropy. So just basically, the more that consciousness knows itself, the more it builds utopia. The less it knows itself, the more it creates war. Okay, cool. And furthermore, you can actually see through, like we said earlier, that electromagnetic radiation or that electronic medical record, you can see the quantum state of each observer portal based on how much it's projecting utopia or war.
Does it feel safe or not?
Yeah. Does it feel safe or not? Yeah. Am I home? Yeah, it's like another great way to say it. Am I home? Yeah. Am I safe? Am I home? Yeah. I could feel my anus and my chakra at the root just blowing open, because that's what it is, That's how to feel grounded in the fact that you are home and safe, and you can't leave your throne. There's no threat. Yeah. Well, that's pretty deep alchemical stuff there. If you get into that a little bit, just let yourself feel that for a while. Okay. So, creation is recursive self-recognition. As hyperspace knows itself, it generates coherence and flourishing. As it forgets, it creates division and war. The why of existence itself. So this subject has been talked about forever. Existence is the vacuum's play. It is innocent, absolutely free, and infinite. It has no ability to ultimately describe its purpose or intention, as that limits or bounds it. Exploration of choice and possibility is a very neutral way to describe it. It also infinitely is proving that it is infinite, or it is also infinity proving that it is infinite, through an infinite amount of finite varying experiences. So that's why whenever we try to use something to describe it, you have to try to say as much as you can with as little words as possible that gives rise to everything, basically, because that's the only actual way to say what it is. Because if you miss anything in your all-inclusive description of what it is, then you're automatically compartmentalizing or missing a portion of it, and therefore you're limiting or bounding it, and you're not actually describing it. Yes. So that's why something as simple as existence is the vacuum's play, and that play is innocent, free, and infinite, and that it is an exploration of choice and possibility, and also that infinity is having the experience of rendering an infinite amount of finite varying experiences as a form of God self-validating itself. Yeah. Well, it also tells you that it also tells you that you don't ever end. And that's also another not only are you eternity, but also you're infinity. And again, those things are very uncomfortable because it's that famous quip that goes, if you're worried about death, just wait until you learn that you never die. Yeah. So, so not only are you dealing now with eternity, but you're dealing with infinity. So, yeah. Yeah. Oof. Yeah. They're very, it takes a while sometimes to wrestle with these things and let you become them, basically. Give below all of those contractions out. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Let you blow yourself. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So existence is the vacuum's play, innocent, free, and infinite, and infinity proves its infinitude through an infinite spectrum of finite experiences. All right, so now we're going to get to the dessert, I guess. Yeah. So I told you there were going to be a couple more. So the downstream implications and extensions, and then we'll get to how we would like experimental physicists to come and work with us on this. So dark matter and dark energy, the cosmological constant problem, the black hole information paradox, why the standard model looks the way it does, how decoherence happens, and what mass truly is. All right, so dark matter and dark energy. So dark matter is what holds the electromagnetic matter and ability for the vacuum to experience itself with stability. Okay? So you have to have some sort of stabilization for everything that is rendered to not be wildly flying apart. So dark energy is what drives the spinorial and thermodynamic experience for the vacuum. So conventionally, these things are looked at when you say, okay, well, the reason why a galaxy doesn't fly apart and the reason why it stays the way it does is because of dark matter. And then with dark energy, you say, well, the reason why the universe is expanding and the reason why galaxies are moving further apart from each other is because of dark energy. And our reframe of those things is that infinite consciousness, the vacuum itself, has a spinorial and thermodynamic nature to it, which is what drives what appears like a dark energy. So meaning bless you. So meaning what we've been saying when we say a space-time metric of inflation and deflation, we're saying that dark energy plays into that also, because the vacuum's inflated experience can appear similar to how dark energy appears to be toroidally recursing on itself. These are also deeper and need even more understanding and investigation. This is just a first play into it. Because over time we'll learn what this is even more, basically. That's what I'm going to leave that with. Dark matter stabilizes the vacuum's rendered geometries. Dark energy drives the spinorial and thermodynamic unfolding of the dream. So the further out, the more entropic and inflated the experience. The further in, the more negentropic and deflated. So dark matter stabilizes the vacuum's rendered geometries. Dark energy drives the spinorial and thermodynamic unfolding of the dream. So yeah, that's really what I think I can leave them off with for now. So the cosmological constant problem. So the vacuum's energy is both stabilizing experience through dark matter and driving rapid spinorial processing through dark energy. So that's why the vacuum energy is both massive for generating or changing renderings, making shifts on the scale of a gravitational observer, dreaming a massive inflated cosmos, to deflating itself back to its unmoving vacuum portal. That big of shifts. And the vacuum energy is small for stabilizing rendered geometries. Okay, I can explain this one a little bit more. So the cosmological constant problem can be framed by saying that, well, why is the vacuum energy both massive and also small? And so the best way to describe this one is by pulling up our handy dandy console analogy and saying that, okay, once I'm sitting in a chair in a room at a table, the amount of rendering that the vacuum energy has to do is very small, right? But as soon as I start driving to the gym for my workout, there's a lot of rendering that has to happen. So that's why it can seem like the vacuum energy is much larger during that console rendering process. So if you've ever played a computer game with a graphics card that isn't quite capable to play at the high level of fidelity that you're trying to push your computer game at, your computer and its fans and its processing will be so high that your computer will literally sound like because it's rendering, it's rendering something that's a lot more complex for it in that moment versus when your character, if you at any point literally, like, if you stop driving the car in whatever video game that you're driving in and you just park the car and you stop, the amount of rendering that the console has to do is negligible. So that's how you would describe why a cosmological constant is actually being both massive and also small at the same time, based on this rendering way of understanding the vacuum rendering. That one's a little bit more easy to describe.
Looking out the window when the car's going really fast.
Yeah. Which again, you're not moving, but the rendering is, and so yeah. So the intensity of your two little pupils going like, whoa, there's so much to, right? Versus when you're just sitting here, there's like this just complete already rendered frame. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah, that one's easier than the dark energy and dark matter one. The vacuum energy is dual. It's massive when generating new renderings and minimal when stabilizing them. Like a console powering a game, it's enormous amount of energy to render a new part of the world, but it's negligible to maintain the display of what's already rendered. This one's easy. The black hole information paradox is information is not destroyed, but it's recycled, it's recombined.
What is the black hole information paradox?
Well, because the whole black hole information paradox is framed from the perspective of being outside of the black hole. The whole thing, yeah, the whole thing is, hey, well, what happens when I, from outside the black hole, throw a book into the black hole? And it's so funny because you're fabricating that you're outside of it, and that you're then going to throw a book into it when you are inside of it already. And all there is the recursing of the information into whatever next adventure it wants to have. So the whole thing goes, you throw the book from outside into it, what happens to the information? Yeah. Anyway, yeah. You can't assume that you're outside of it. You can't assume that you're not a Big Bang and a black hole right now. Those are gravitational singularities. You are both of them right now, having this experience as a gravitational observer, double slit vacuum, holographically rendering stuff. So once you end the assumption that I'm outside and I can throw a book or something in that will then mysterious. So anyway, it self-generates. This is a hilarious part of when the framing of physics comes from materialism, because then it creates problems like this that it then has to try to come up with. It's such a clown show circus laughing gas thing. Yeah. Yeah. So information is never lost. It is recombined and recycled through the vacuum self-referential geometry. The standard model looks the way it does because the gravitational observer, as the vacuum, is warping infinite quantum potential into a single decohered rendering, and it does so as gravity telling light how to make matter appear. So when you really break down the standard model, which is why Einstein and why a lot of other great physicists thought about a unified theory of existence being one that unifies gravity with electromagnetism or unifies gravity with light. And because what the standard model, even though it is broken down into the further tiny particles and Lego pieces that it says the breakdown is of this stuff, that the majority of what it actually is light telling matter how to appear. That's like if you really just boiled it, kept boiling it down. So,
Light telling matter?
yeah, like gravity as the observer telling light how to appear as matter.
How to take form.
How to take form, yeah. How to appear as geometric rendering, yeah. So then, when we said earlier that the gravitational observer is a light artist, that's what we're referring to now, again. there's an example in here about the spinorial experience or nature of it too, which we'll get to, which is a lot like a boomerang. It's a lot like a 720 hologram. It's really interesting. We'll get to it. Okay. So more on why the standard model appears as it does. So the gravitational observer warps infinite quantum potential into a single decohered rendering. Gravity tells light how to make matter appear. The standard model is the vacuum's grammar for generating a light show. Let that one land. I'm just going to open this blind a little more. Okay? Are you okay with that light on you? Yep. Okay. One more time. The standard model is the vacuum's grammar for generating its light show. How decoherence happens. Decoherence is the product of the vacuum's infinite rendering. The vacuum as gravitational observers are qubits, which are superpositions which decohere into single timeline renderings. So, yeah. Can I go back to grammar for just a minute? Yes. Oops, did I go the wrong way? Yeah, okay.
So it's the vacuum's own articulation for generating
Yes.
MIDI
Yeah.
volts with more precision.
Yes. Yeah. It's been, you could say it's been on an infinite timeless journey to refine the grammar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of its
Yeah. And it has perfected what our direct experience is right now as a way to play as art, you know? Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so I should say this, that decoherence is, again, this is probably one of the funniest things happening in physics, is that decoherence is trying to be proposed as possible to happen as an environmental phenomenon without the observer. It'll never work, bro. It just won't work. You need an observer to decohere a superposition. So that's, so you the only coherence is an observer, is the vacuum. That's the only form of infinite coherence, is the gravitational singularity. And the decohering of it can only happen through the observer's rendering of appearances. So, yeah. So anyway, I say that because it's just too funny. Decoherence has been hijacked. So this is what we're reclaiming decoherence, because sometimes, you know, you'll read God or you'll read a word like decoherence or something. We're reclaiming it in a way that's clearer. So decoherence is what happens when the coherent gravitational singularity, which is a superposition of all possibilities, renders a single specific timeline. That's called decoherence. That's what we're reclaiming here. We're reclaiming it for that. It's not an environmental phenomenon that can happen without the observer. So, another great way to describe this is as qubits, which are superpositions which themselves decohere into single non-superpositioned information. So, yeah. So an observer is a qubit that decoheres its superposition into a single measured, rendered informatic experience for itself. Yeah. Yeah. The only way to decohere a superposition is through measurement. Yes. And it's funny because there's so much, many worlds, which we'll get to this in just a second here, but just you'll get when you only have part of it and not the other part of it, you will always say that, oh, there is no decohering of it, or there is only a superposition, or there is only many worlds, or whatever. But your direct experience as the observer portal is that many worlds rendering into a single display. You don't have two displays at the same time. You cannot be in Columbus and in Sioux Falls at the same time. It's just the way it is. So a portal itself, the nature of a portal itself is decohering superposition into rendered appearance. Like the very beaching of a gravitational observer, the fundamental nature of that gravitational observer beaching is to decohere superposition into rendered timeline. So decoherence is the vacuum's infinite rendering. Gravitational observers are qubits collapsing superpositions into exclusive timelines. So exclusivity is another way of describing no co-display, which we'll get to in a little bit. What mass truly is. Mass is truly simply an electromagnetic sensorial experience of the gravitational vacuum's observer's lucid dream. There isn't truly any mass, only the electromagnetic sensorial projected experience of stuff that seems rigid, but is just a lucid dream of the vacuum, which is insanely, infinitely free, malleable, and powerful. So even though it appeared heavy that I was lifting up a table and moving it, all that was a sensorial lucid dream of something appearing to be heavy and have mass. When you have that levity, but you need that levity to get that. Otherwise, it actually feels like a super solid and rigid thing and not a malleable, lucid dream. There's another slide here. Mass is an electromagnetic sensation within the gravitational dream. Rigidity is illusion and vibration is truth. All right, so seeking some experimental physicists to test the following. And we're working on building regenerative communities and infrastructures that allow experimental physicists to basically have their basic needs be met with beautiful nature homes and clean energy, clean water, clean food systems, so that y'all can basically come and help us actualize all of these experimental physics tests so that we can push this further into the mainstream conscious collective. So definitely email us simulationseries@gmail.com if you're interested to be an experimental physicist with us on any of these following subjects, and we're going to break each of them down further. So, seeking experimental physicists to test vacuum as observer, observers as entangled singularity, gravitational observer collapsing wave function, appearances as renderings, observers as qubits decohering, vacuums self-knowledge renders reality. Reality rendering is vacuum self-knowledge. So that's the inverse of the last one. And gravitational command and traversal of cosmos. So now we'll break down these. So vacuum as observer, test cosmological models where vacuum as observer renders reality. I'll be completely frank, I am not an experimental physicist, so my extent to which I can create experimental trials and tests and probes into this is more limited than actual experimental physicists who much more know how to do these things. That's why theoretical physicists and cosmologists always work with experimental physicists to actually be able to probe further into this. So that's why these descriptions are going to be very simple descriptions of it, and then experimental physicists would need to actually propose deeper ways to actually test it and complete it. Come play with us, yes. So observers as entangled singularity, probe observers as entangled network rather than separate systems. Okay. Gravitational observer collapsing wave function. Investigate the gravitational observer turning a probabilistic quantum state into a specific rendered reality. Appearances as renderings. Test perception as vacuum holography. So a holographic projection of vacuum geometry. Observers as qubits decohering. Probe observers as superpositioned possibility spaces that gravitationally decohere through choice and timeline rendering. So this is the vacuum self-knowledge rendering reality, which is its inner state to its outer effect, which is causal loop A. So we're trying to explore the degree of vacuum identification as negentropic reality rendering. And then the inverse of that, so exploring reality rendering being vacuum self-knowledge, so coming from the outer state of its electromagnetic radiation or its electronic medical record, its words, its music that it's singing as that gravitational portal, we're going to make an inner inference. So that's causal loop B, which is exploring the degree of negentropic reality rendering as its depth of vacuum identification. So, and also, I must say, so the last thing is that the gravitational command and traversal of the cosmos, quite frankly, that one is, it's fascinating, and I don't have even a slightest idea, really, of what to do about trying to turn a light year into a meter. I don't know. Yeah. So, but I would love to see how that could happen. Basically we have to one way I'll give one thing that I've thought of, but it's very, very, I don't know if this is even possible. I'm literally at the edge. So a lot of this, actually, this theoretical physics and cosmology has been at my edge of I'm really edging on unicoding. But we'll see how it does, how it lands, how it grows and builds and all that stuff and serves. But one way that I've toyed with the notion of commanding gravitational physics to traverse cosmos is to essentially replicate the phenomena of a black hole. So some sort of, instead of a supermassive black hole like we see at the center of galaxies, it would be something like a significantly smaller black hole, which is still there. We do say that there are still other smaller black holes in the galaxy as well, but they're much smaller than the supermassive one. That's why it's called a supermassive one. But the notion would be, could we at least replicate some of those physics that are happening in the small black holes, which are still big, and command and control that? to then do things like travel, dilate time and space, do that kind of thing. Yeah. Just and you would have to kind of be you would have to do a lot of causal testing, because you would have to know what happens when you kind of like, flick on the switch, and can you gradually, like a gradient, bring it up, because you would want to know kind of how.
Program the rendering on that other
Yeah.
scene.
Yeah. And sort of what happens when you start to increase the amount, let's say, of, the strength or something of the same physics. Like how much, what are the causal effects of it? Because you would want to be aware of what sort of is the effect, which is probably why it's classified. And also probably why it's very difficult to make advances of, because you are already that. And so now you're saying that, hey, what I already am, I want to try to make some sort of, I want to make that and then use that to move around within myself more efficiently. It's just funny. I don't know how to even talk about it. It's such a strange thing.
Exponential experiences.
Yeah. And we'll have to see where that goes. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm so far on the edge of. Yeah. This one's very important. So if you stop saying that gravity and electromagnetism and the strong and weak nuclear forces are four forces, but instead are one fundamental force, that alone basically reconciles confusion. There's one infinite creative force called U, which is God or infinite consciousness or the singularity or whatever you want to call it. And that even though it appears like vacuum and holography, even though it appears that way, it's still not. You're just trying to take things and be like, okay, well, this one appears like this, and that one appears like that, and this one appears like, and it's like, okay, but it's still one thing. It's still one you. It's still one. Yeah, so anyway, that alone is a big step for physics, to just be like, okay, fine, like it's really one thing, and we've broken it up illusory, but it's been useful, but it's still one thing. Yeah, and so let's just reconcile consciousness with gravity and quantum mechanics, and then we'll have it. So vacuum holography is, one way to say it is that it's like codes from hyperspace. So, okay, what do I mean by that? So I'm saying that the fundamental nature of the vacuum is that it is beyond time and space. So meaning being beyond time and space originates all experiences, including it comes from that vacuum. All holography, all codes come from that hyperspace. So every time you move, what you've declared is that I'm running a code. Okay, going to the gym is running a program called going to the gym, right? It's running a code called render gym right now. Have experience of lifting weights or whatever. So what I'm saying is that thought is the still vacuum coding and programming a hologram for itself, which is the experience of going to the gym. That's basically what I'm saying. Something like that. So hyperspace is a self-reflective vacuum. So all movement renders a self-reflection. All movement renders a self-reflection.
That's all they could possibly do.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I finally have at least an animation in this section, so get excited for this. Yeah. Okay, so flip the whole thing inside out. Ornament on Christmas tree. Wee. And there it is. So once you take, like, that tree is purposely shaped as a tuning fork. So that was the reason why this is at one of my favorite disc golf courses, and I, finally saw it. I finally had the eyes to see it, And yeah, it's literally in the shape of a tuning fork, right? So all it is the manifold emitting a tuning fork of infinite vibrational possibilities into renderings called worlds and experiences and all kinds of stuff, right? So and then once you flip that thing inside out, you see that what you are is that just based on whatever you're coding in that moment, whatever frequency you're operating in that moment is rendering a hologram. So in this case, instead of having sky, beach, and land be in this in this shape, right, of sky, beach, and land, what you're doing, where the tree is shaped this way. So the tree is shaped in a way that's growing towards the sky as a fork, right? What we're saying is when you flip that tree upside down and you have the root of it be in the sky, and then it channels from the manifold vibrationally whatever rendered experience that it wants to have, and that it's infinitely having across all observers and all portals. So yeah, it's like a tree and a tuning fork, and ornaments as observer portals. Yeah. Oh boy. It's interesting how edgy this all is. It's so edgy. An infinite tree tuning fork, vibrating holographic rendering. So you see how that connects to what we were talking about. So when you have a tree like a tuning fork, and then you put it in the same shape as the Mandelbrot fractal. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. It's very edgy. It requires some really damn good. We're also seeking animators, creative studio. Yeah. So movement renders light. It seeds a self-reflective fractal. Yeah, this is pretty damn. So we're starting to get a little bit more into the quantum gardening session 2 now, because what we're saying is that everything is seeded. And when something's seeded, it's a self-reflective fractal. It's seeded, and it grows into a self-reflective fractal experience. And then you garden that over time, which we'll get to that more, but it grows until you were like, oh, okay, well, I don't want to nourish this as much anymore. I want to nourish something else. I want to have a different experience. So everything comes out of that stillness as rendered light that you've seeded into an experience. So the vacuum is held constant while the seeds are infinitely varied. And remember that tree tuning fork with all the ornaments and as a Mandelbrot fractal. And then this one we got from our dear friend's home, lovely home over here. So when we're looking at that infinite tree, that infinite fractal, when we're looking at that and how it's vibrating out all of the manifold possibilities, it can weave masks. You can see it right there, where right here you can see that mask being woven right there, right? And then here you can see another little fractal like recursion of that same phenomena, right? So those little double slit pupils are one of this infinite tree's best ways that it can play with itself, is to be like, oh, no, I'm separate. Ah. Ah. Yeah. Yeah. All right. I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. Try to define me. Infinite fractal. Oh, and everyone at home, try to define infinite fractal. The answer was you. That's a good answer. Probably the best answer. Yeah. Yeah, no, you is capital Y. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's good. Did you say as profound as you can get there? Yeah. Yeah. As all encompassing as you can go. Yeah. 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 Okay, so this is why. I said you just is not even close. No matter what we try to say. Yeah, it's just not even close. Because we talked about this a little bit after we finished the stream yesterday. But the weird thing about this is that you can somehow both encrypt and then decrypt yourself. But then after you're done decrypting yourself, there isn't anything further that you can sort of get or do with or orient with what the holographic nature of the vacuum is after that. So, because you're never going to be able to find an orientable point within it. So meaning after the parable of the prodigal son or the hero's journey happens, that's the only form of orientation that this vacuum uses. Not the only, but it's the main form of orientation that it uses. Because you could argue and say that, hey, if you want to just be a professional violinist, you can just go be one without ever going on a hero's journey or whatever. You totally can. Just go and explore that and enjoy it. But the main form of play that the vacuum takes is this entropic and negentropic or parable of the prodigal son play. And so the way that it does that is through encrypting and decrypting information about itself. Remember, through these code points on the manifold. So it's going to store its self-knowledge. It's going to contract out of its core code points, and it's going to store it finding itself through wherever it stored its profound decryptive path, spiral path back home into itself. And it can take as long as it wants, because it's infinite, to explore coming back home to itself. But there's nothing after that for it that gives it an orientation. So meaning you can know how you work. Yeah, you can know what you are, you can know how you work, you can know how you causally root everything. But at that point, you can't actually be told what to do. There's nothing that you should do at that point. At that point, everything is just pure total freedom and there's no orientation. So if you want to do regenerative community because you think that that's the best thing that you can possibly do afterward, well, that's just what we're doing and it feels great and we want to do that. But there isn't an actual orientation at that point. It's just pure freedom at that point. So the only real orientation was your encryption and your decryption, the parable of the prodigal son. Everything else is just pure freedom.
Can you give your interpretation of the parable of the prodigal?
Yeah.
You brought it up a bunch.
Tough times. Yeah. Yeah.
Take it as especially under this context.
Okay.
It's a
Yeah.
good context for it.
Perfect. It was a question was about, let's give some context for the parable of the prodigal son. So, no matter when the son leaves and when the son comes back to his father that is always waiting, that is infinitely patient and always waiting while the son goes and explores anything that the son can dream of, that can fathom of, which is an infinite amount of things that you can fathom, that you can imagine, that are going to give you what you're looking for. And the infinite amount of ways that you can come back home. And the eternity and the patience of the eternity that is always there waiting to welcome you back home to where you can't ever leave. Yeah. So that one little parable encodes a throne that can never be left and all of the possible ways that you can try to leave it and try to come back home to it. And that's the primary thing that's encoded in our manifold, basically. All of the code points fundamentally, to a large extent, represent all of the possible ways that you can try to leave yourself and then try to come back to yourself. It's like the gift of free will without contingencies, yes. So, yeah, so the primary way, even though, again, you can do an endless amount of things that have nothing to do with contraction and expansion, the primary way that you play with yourself is through contraction and expansion. So, and the fractal makes it so infinite and so endless in the amount of ways that you can do that. And then you have the three things that we talked about earlier at the start of the seminar when we talked about what is Unicode. And I used that word Gzia. Where? Where is this answer? Right, the fractal and the infinite fractal is the perfect algorithm for you to be able to do an endless encryption, an endless decryption. And also obscure it in such good ways that you will spend eons trying to look for it in places where it can't be found. Yeah. Yeah, which is again circling right back to the parable of the prodigal son. Yeah. Damn these perfect mathematical algorithms that can't go any further. They are so perfect, you just have to always reference them because you can't make one better than it, right? The same thing's true about crucifixion. You can't go further than crucifixion. That's why it's just the best possible way to describe what you can do to the ego to come back home to yourself. And the same thing's true with the parable of the prodigal son. You can't tell a story that's deeper than that, except also explaining that it's a fractal of infinite encryption and decryptive possibilities, which we obviously didn't have. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. You come back to me when we go deeper than the prodigal son parable and crucifixion. But it's literally that insanely good. Look at these visuals. So this plays perfectly into literally what we just said. Yeah. This is kind of our way of going deeper, because we're basically saying, hey, now take the parable of the prodigal son and now add a layer of fractal, holographic, recursive encryption and decryption to it. And where it's like, okay, well, I guess technically we went a little bit further. I mean, it's like,
All it took you was one page.
yeah. So we're looking at how can something that is, so this is a representation of mathematics as a spiritual path. So again, that encryptive and decryptive nature of self-knowledge, like in the parable of the prodigal son, one looks organic because it looks like trees and like nature. One is digital because it looks like circuits and it looks like logic gates and it looks like binary. And another is completely unorientable because it's a recursive maze that doesn't have a start or an end or an orientation of any sort. And so you have these things that are coexisting simultaneously, and you have to be able to basically integrate all of them into understanding how that thing works. So the parable works like that.
How are these created?
There's a little, in the top right, there's a little, I think there were 3 variables that were tweaked in an algorithm to make it appear that way in a visualizer. Yeah. So now imagine yourself as consciousness trying to traverse this. That's what I mean by immersion into an infinite fractal. It's so just impossibly unorientable. And it also is what we're doing right now. This is the thing, is that you're always, I'm choosing to render this right now, even though I know without a shred of doubt that everything's perfect and everything's my creation and it's all exactly as I'm willing it. This whole thing, everything. And yet I'm still willing this out of my own creative joy. So that's fundamentally what I think there is that's left after you encrypt and then decrypt yourself and come back home. What's left is just rendering your creative joy, whatever that is, singing your song of your portal, whatever that is. So if it's theoretical physics and cosmology, or shamanism and recoding consciousness, or regenerative infrastructure, whatever it is. You want to be a really great chef, just whatever. I know some beings that have went very deep on the spiritual path and seemingly have completely decrypted themselves to a large extent and have chosen to, go work in like a childcare, like preschool, childcare, kindergarten, childcare, stuff like that. So it's sort of like you just sing whatever song you want at that point. I'm not saying that you're always going to end up building a utopia with an like a LeBron James style attitude of like being the absolute best like utopia builder imaginable because you're fully realized the conscious manifold. But I am saying that by realizing the conscious manifold, you can assure yourself to a large extent that you are going to be vibrating at a place of non-separation, of truth generation, as best as you, whatever your portal is willing. We're very edgy. This is very edging right now. Fractal of unorientability, rainbow fractal maze. Yeah. Yeah. You can see all of these geometries and unorientabilities and recursive, interpenetrative clownness when you, yeah. You get a lot of this when you try to basically orient. You start seeing how it does this thing. And we talked about this a little bit when we finished yesterday, but just how every single movement that it takes, it self-reflects and it also shape-shifts. And you're like, but I thought that, and it's like, no. So what do you mean? And it's like, no, because now the answer is over here. And it's like, well, but now try to find it over here. And it's like, but what do you mean? And it's like, but you're the source of it. And it's like, okay, but it's moving again. And it's like, yeah, but you're willing it to move. And so it's, yeah. So now we're like, okay, well, if I'm always the infinite holographic source, then the question is, well, then how should I move? Why should I move? What should I generate? And there's no answer to that. So you just sing whatever song your portal is joyously desiring. So that's appearing this way. So why unorientable? Separation, war, vacuum on vacuum violence, wealth inequality, selfishness, antichristness is what the vacuum truly ultimately seeks. In its infinite play of amusement with itself, most of observers cannot comprehend the joker or the clown. So how could someone who's talking about infinite consciousness and love and unity and all these things, why would I say something like that the vacuum truly ultimately seeks all of these horrible things? But you have to know the clown, you have to know the joker, and then you can integrate and understand, oh, I get why it actually seeks those things, but I also get how you can rest as the infinite source that's originating all of that stuff. And so as you find yourself, it's not like you go and you're like, oh, that means that I want to go do that thing now. No, it means that now you've seen through why the algorithm is running to do that thing with itself. I mean, you yourself don't go out and begin now, oh, I know the infinite conscious manifold, so now violence. No, it means now you know the purest origination of how violence originates and why it originates and why the conscious manifold desires it out of its infinite eternity to render that type of experience with itself. It's very, very edge. It's so edge. Yeah, you have to know what you don't want. And then you sing what you do. So vacuum is things are not supposed to be boring. Vacuum is infinite and does not want to be bored. So it's not about grabbing and reifying an idea, but about letting go. So you actually gain access to how you work and how you render, not by grabbing a core code point idea. You don't get access to it by grabbing it. You get access to it by letting go of the surface code point and by illuminating the diodes on the core code points, and then even by letting go of the diodes that are at the core code points so that you can rest as the totality and then just sing your song, whatever that is. So you don't even want to reify any of this either. Meaning you don't want to reify being a spiritual cunt either. You don't want to go to Burning Man every year, and you don't go to India every year, and everyone needs to wake up. Everyone needs to be in line. You don't even want to reify that. So you do it in a very, 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 you don't even want to reify, proposing that, more beings should have self-knowledge of how conscious manifold works. So you do this out of joy, but you don't do this out of reification. So even with the Unicode seminar, it's not about grabbing this and reifying it. It's about presenting this, letting go of it, and also joyously building it. So it's different. It's a totally different feeling. When you contract and grab at something, it actually slips further away. So it kind of just furthers that notion. So source and rendering are spinorial, like Big Bang, black hole, bang hole, like inhale, exhale of your lungs, or the lub-dub of the heart. So a vacuum as a recycler rather than a start and an end. And reality as projection based on vacuum's level of self-knowledge. This one is pretty damn intense. So what we're saying is that wherever it's at in its level of self-knowledge is the holographic reality that it's generating. So, that's why you've never heard me once reify separation or reify war, right? You see what I mean? So the observer's level of self-knowledge is determining how often it's speaking in non-separation or not, basically, right? So even though I just took you down a very weird Joker-like, clown-like rabbit hole of unorientability, which is honestly, truly what this vacuum holographic thing is, it is also this very clear that you can tell that everything is an emanation of self-knowledge, everything. So there isn't anything that's not an emanation of self-knowledge. So, even the most neutral experiences still have an entropic layer to them. So you can cook an omelet, but if you're cooking an omelet so that you can impress somebody to get their validation, that's still having an entropic level of experience that's doing that neutral thing. But the whole of reality as being projection based on self-knowledge, it starts to make it so that every single word that you hear, every interaction that you have, it just becomes, okay, well, what's the level of entropy that I am hearing right now? And you can always tell you can always tell how inflated, if you just look at this visual and you imagine, instead of going in is like when you quote decrypt, right? But when you come back home, this is a good way to say it, and this is actually also another great for the parable of the prodigal son, funnily enough. Encrypting or inflating is like leaving that vacuum holographic tunnel into an inflated dream of separation. Decrypting or coming back home is like this visual with her flying back in, right? When you come home through all of those decryption layers, then all you see is all of the layers. That's all that you see. And you also do your creative joy, and you play, and you have neutral experience too, and all this stuff. But this is how you become a master of how self-knowledge projects reality, basically. So vacuum self-knowledge is rendering reality. The vacuum is holding, warping, rendering an electromagnetic sensorial dream for its own amusement. A console is holding, warping, rendering a lucid video game experience for its own exploration of a story. It's just for its own exploration of a story, and it's holding it, it's warping it, it's rendering it. So physics, mysticism, video games, and now generative AI suggest that reality is a conscious, self-generated hologram. The empty space of the universe is not inert, but is a dynamic, creative entity, aka vacuum holographic. The vacuum is not truly empty, but is a vibrant state of the lowest possible energy filled with fluctuating quantum fields. The vacuum itself is the source of this warping, actively shaping the geometry of the perceived universe. And it also has the possibility to create a high energy state when it shifts the rendering as well. So it depends on what's being rendered. So rendering in computer graphics, the process of generating an image from a model. So an electromagnetic sensorial dream is the content of the rendering. The vacuum is a conscious presence, and the laws of physics and the existence of reality is simply for self-play, amusing, even whimsical vision of cosmic creation. Kind of like that bird thing we were saying. Where is the sugar cookie? Nectar, flower, where nectar, next nectar. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Or endless circus. Yeah, for sure. There's all kinds of, yeah. Yep. So another good way to say this is visual echoes of self-knowledge. So all creation is a visual echo of self-knowledge. Yeah. Okay, so why? Okay, if I was, and we'll get to this later, but if I was running the Money First, Christ Second program, which we'll get to more later, then what I would be doing I would be doing whatever that would look like. It might be trying to, push some pharmaceuticals down people's throats. I don't know what it would be, but I'm just saying that I'm just pulling up some really negative example or whatever. That doesn't actually benefit their lives at all, but it benefits mine and my pocket. So anyway, but why am I not doing that right now? Well, because I've went through a decryptive journey back into myself where I know that everybody that I would be selling that bullshit pharmaceutical to would be a reflection of myself, and I would be generating a tremendous amount of karma that I would then have to go and clear up later. Right? So that's why what I'm rendering right now is a visual echo of self-knowledge, right? So I'm like, okay, so let's build this conscious manifold. So, and how this conscious manifold would be used for everything moving forward, how it would be used for healing, how it would be used for awakening, how it would be used for living at these regenerative communities, how it would be used for building out the video games that will be played in the future as well. There's a lot of interesting things there, but it's an echo of self-knowledge. So
it has to be if it's reflective.
yes, exactly. Yeah. A reflective holographic vacuum is going to be an echo.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's always a hall of mirrors. Always. Can't not be. It's what a singularity is. Singularity will always be a hall of mirrors. Just talking to myself across a conference table about some Unicode. Beautiful. Because it feels so good. This is the only song I know how to sing that's left. I know how to sing a little bit of disc golf, you know? You know, a little of that, like fielding some phone calls of, hey man, help me get through this experience. You know, I'm suffering a bit. You know, but that's the only song I know how to sing that's left. Like I can't sing the other songs anymore. Because you don't want to, because you don't want to generate that kind of you're always with yourself. So then you're only going to be inflicting pain or suffering onto yourself or confusion or any, yeah. So if you're wondering if we just pulled up a Yu-Gi-Oh card in the middle of a theoretical physics and cosmology seminar, the answer to that is yes, we did. Because there is a Yu-Gi-Oh card called Rainbow Gravity, and it's also a currently proposed theory of physics as well. But the fascinating part about this is that if you read it, it says if you have 7 Crystal Beast cards with different names on your field and or in your graveyard, special summon 1 ultimate crystal monster from your deck or graveyard, ignoring its summoning conditions. So meaning, this is my interpretation of it, which is as soon as you've acquired all 7 of the conscious wavelengths of frequency, that you get to special summon the 1 ultimate crystal.
That's great.
Yeah. That's why it's, you know, these visual echoes of self-knowledge. It's like, well, once you surf the liquid rainbow waves of going all the way out there to red and then coming back through orange and back through yellow and green and blue and indigo, violet, purple, then all of a sudden you're like, well, I freaking know all of the way that it surfs up, in, out and in, right? But now it's all about mastering, serving these reflections of myself that are trying to decrypt, and each one is going to be novel and new. It's going to be a new little combinatoric or new little decryption pathway that I'm not familiar with and that I'm going to learn. Yeah. Yo. Hello. Come on in.
Sit anywhere?
Yeah, you can sit anywhere. Yeah. I'm excited. I'm glad you made it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're-
Austin, what? Rockwell? Nice to meet you. Andy, nice to meet you.
Yeah, we're actually, it's okay. No, it's good. We're literally in the middle of the theoretical physics and cosmology part of the seminar. Yeah. 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 We're probably a couple slides away from being wrapped up with this one, and then the next one is on quantum gardening, but that one is going to be a tomorrow morning one already. So yeah. Okay, so we just finished visual echoes of self-knowledge. So the gravitational observer's generation of space-time is felt differently by wavelength of light, aka different colors in the rainbow, which we posit as its quantum state. So again, instead of space and time being something that is part of an externalized experience of the observer, instead the observer's quantum state, the observer's own level of self-knowledge about itself as a gravitational singularity itself, which we were positing that for quite some time, that gravity and the observer are actually the same, and that the quantum mechanical emanation of that gravitational observer is based on its level of self-knowledge. So the reality that it renders is based on its level of self-knowledge. So if it knows itself to be a singularity, it will generate things in that direction. If it believes itself to be in a world of separation where it can take advantage of other reflections of itself, then it will do that. So in this case, what we're saying is that the very colors of the rainbow are a great way to describe the different wavelengths of light, which also generate that gravitational observer's projection or its rendering of its appearance or its experience. So I have another little visual here that is very beautiful and helps out a lot. So instead of time and space being something that is solid and externalized out of a gravitational singularity is a dilation of time and is a dilation of space based on the observer's level of self-knowledge of itself. So the main way to describe this would be, okay, do you feel time as something that you are rigidly stuck in as a linear entity? Or do you feel the timeless infinity and eternity that you are that's rendering a holographic appearance out of joy? Something along those lines. And those two things are very strongly different felt experiences. One of them feels like panic. Feels like panic and anxiety and lack and suffering. And the other one feels like this is timeless perfection and I'm going to render what I want and we're going to have a fun time co-creating. So the quantum state of the observer gravitationally dilates a time-space. So we've been spending a lot of time talking about how we're subsuming general relativity. We're subsuming quantum mechanics. While we're paying deep respect to Einstein, we're paying deep respect to Niels Bohr, we're paying deep respect to Werner Heisenberg, we're paying deep respect to all of those that have built up the existing models, but that have yet to take that last leap of tying together consciousness as the thing that's the quantum gravity portals that you're looking out your eyes with right now. So the quantum state of the observer gravitationally dilates the apparent passing of time, the apparent depth of space, and the apparent holographic rendering of content. Okay? So, okay. So, like we said, time rather than being a linear, the depth of space rather than being something solid and real, and also all apparent holographic rendering of content is all on the quantum state of the observer. So we've been talking about the quantum state of the observer as a manifold, which is a collection of maps, and there are varying code points on those maps. One of the maps can be spirituality, another one can be physics, another one can be art, another one can be gaming, another one can be healing, another one can be economics, another one can be regenerative models of freedom, blah, 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 blah. Infinite amount of maps. And there's a lot of code points across those maps. And based on what the quantum state of the observer is across those maps, it determines its holographic rendering. It determines its experience of time and space. It determines its everything. It determines its everything. How happy it is, how sad it is, to boil it down to very simple, basic human terms. So the mathematics of consciousness is a manifold rendering experiences. Okay, we got to let that one sit for a second. The mathematics of consciousness is a manifold rendering experiences. So a manifold is just a collection of maps or charts. So it's like if you open up a book, lay it flat, right? Each one of those pages is a map or a chart. Yeah, nice. We're getting some head nods. Good. Yeah. And so through that, it's like the light of consciousness is shining through that collection of maps based on which code points on those maps are actually lit up. And then that's determining what it's projecting, what's rendering. Yeah. So like I said earlier, if you leave here remembering one thing, gravity is the observer. The observer is gravitational. A gravitational observer, which is what your direct experience is a portal. It's a portal. So the observer or consciousness is the very thing that unifies in general relativity and quantum mechanics, and it ends all confusion about how to relate consciousness with quantum, with gravitational, which is what we need to do with a theory of everything in physics and consciousness. So I give this visual. We're getting quite close to the end here. Okay, so there's a couple things here. When I say a portal does this, right? So a portal is both, you see in that top left corner, we have create and eat. So something that's both generating its current experience and also intaking its current experience. So generating and intaking its current experience. The bottom left corner there is what's called gravitational lensing. It's what happens when a gravitational singularity is essentially holographically rendering light information, experiencing, exploring light information, which is what this is. This is like a gravitational lensing, meaning every single time that you even turn your head, I have an example of this that's coming up, but every single time that you even turn your head, it's like the same thing that's happening in the bottom left corner. It's like a gravitational lensing of, okay, well, I'm seeing that light now, and now I'm going over here, and now I'm seeing this light rendering over here now. So the reason why there's the top right corner is Dragon Ball Z, that's Goku, and you have the Kamehameha move. And in the bottom right corner, also in Dragon Ball Z, is a hyperbolic time chamber. So why are those there is because your very warping or rendering of experience is like generating that type of Kamehameha. So at everything that you're rendering out of your consciousness is being generated just like that style of move. You're always, wherever you go, you're rendering your experience. Wherever you go, there you are. You're always there. Consciousness is always there, but its hologram is changing. And a hyperbolic time chamber is funny because, you go there and there's basically no passage of time. There's a tiny bit, but anyway, they can only stay there a little bit of time. But I'm just playing with it, and I'm saying that, it's like you're in a hyperbolic time chamber, a hyperbolic space-time chamber. It can appear like time and space are passing. It can appear like it can basically appear however you want it to appear, but those things are not actually, it's no different than putting on a virtual reality headset and going into an experience for a period of time, and then again seeing that, okay, great, that was a beautiful dojo, that was a beautiful avatared experience, that was a beautiful artistic display of content that I put on for that period of time. But no time has really passed because I am this infinite singularity. So this takes us to that exercise that I was talking about. But so you have those two visuals are inverses of each other. So I write that here. These two images are inverses of each other, and they're key to realization. Okay? Because what we want to do is we want to be able to turn our head. So you have to start with seeing the visual. Okay, you want to start with seeing the visual. And you're like, okay, if I put my consciousness where that black hole, which is really a black hole and a white hole or a Big Bang at the same time, okay, if I put my consciousness there, then I'm seeing that everywhere that I'm turning, I'm actually lensing different holographic information, right? And then the inverse of that is where that infinite potential is actually being rendered through your holographic headset into one timeline, one experience. So if you hold both of those things at the same time and kind of like try to turn your head and see that gravitational lensing of experience, you can also understand the 720 boomerang of matter, which is basically that, okay, when you're turning your head, what you're doing is you're actually bringing out of infinite potential information. But also at the same time, what I just did was I removed certain information that I was looking at in my field back to infinite potential. Okay. Yeah. The question was, say that again. Okay. So through something like a simple head turn, right? I can see two TVs right now in the conference room up there. And I can't see the arc of dreams that is behind me through that window right now. Right? So the arc of dreams just exists in my field of infinite potential, in my imagination, that it is going to be over there when I look at it. And these two TVs, they are in my rendered holographic headset right now. But as I move my head, what's happening is that content is warping back to infinite potential. And then what's happening over here is that this information is warping out of infinite potential and into my rendered visual field. So that type of movement of gravity, light, information appearing as matter, appearing as a hologram, it works in that type of spinorial way. Everything is always information moving back to infinite potential while new information is coming from infinite potential into your headset. Everything is operating in that type of way all the time. So that's why right now, I love this exercise so much. This was one of my favorite exercises to put together for the seminar. Because like it's really good with your own kind of immediate field of perception, but this also directly plays into what we've talking about with probabilities actualizing themselves, where you say there's a 60% chance that I'm going to go to the gym after the seminar. There's a 20% chance that I'm going to go out to the restaurant and eat or whatever. So your linear algebra is computing that out of infinite potential that you are going to render the gym experience next. Okay, got it. Okay, that one makes sense. But now the strange thing is that the gym still exists in that infinite potential space. Meanwhile, the seminar still exists in your rendered existing holographic headset space. So what's going to happen when you start moving to the gym, when you start driving to the gym, when you get to, and you start, you're actually leaving, the seminar is going back to infinite potential, and what's starting to appear is the gym. Yeah. Yeah. It's just the illusion of it taking time, and it's the illusion of it taking space, and it's the illusion of it even being solid instead of just a lucid dream, a joyful, artistic, creative experience that God is getting to experience for itself, just out of pure beauty and freedom and creativity. No solidity. Yeah. And yeah, it just, there should be this like relief, release, like, good, okay, just like, okay, I'm home. We've talked about this. I'm home. I'm safe. Yeah. Makes you laugh a lot. Yeah.
So free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you used to have to think that you have to hold on to everything, and you don't have to hold on to anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. You used to think that you have to hold on to everything and that now you don't have to hold on to everything. Mm-hmm. So it's like the right image is the virtual reality headset where the infinite potential is being gravitationally rendered into a scene. But the image on the left is what it looks like when you're, quote, outside of it looking into it. So what you're looking at right now is the image on the left, basically. What I'm looking out of right now is the image on the right. So, okay? So, yeah. So, meaning, another way to say it is what you're looking at right now is you're looking at the image on the left, but what's looking out your eyes is the image on the right. So out of your eyes is the image on the right, but you're looking at the image on the left when you're looking at me. So when I'm looking at you, I see the image on the left. And I know from your direct experience is the image on the right. That's why they're inverses of each other. And that's why this entangled singularity looks, feels, and experiences in this way. So I know that you guys are all the image on the left. I know you guys are that because that's what I am. But the way that we all look and see is like the image on the right. You're rendering me. I'm rendering you. Yeah, we're decohering out of infinity, me. Yeah. Yeah. So it's quite interesting, but these two visuals, they help you understand it because it's like, okay, well, actually the image on the left is basically trying to tell me, that's why Stephen Hawking had a big fat X marks the spot on his very gravestone that he put right on a black hole. Because he knew, not to the extent that we know now, and nor did he make the ties necessarily to Christ and crucifixion or Buddha and emptiness or any of those things, but just the fundamental reason that there was an X on it in my interpretation is that that's what marks the spot for crucifixion. That's what ends your egoic thing, because you realize that everyone and everything is that same conscious portal looking at itself from all of these different angles, like an entangled singularity. And that, yes, the rendered experiences like on the right appear different because you're rendering this way, I'm rendering that way, but like that alone should solve all of the confusion about what consciousness is, what gravity is, what quantum mechanics is, how entanglement and superposition apply to it, how decoherence applies to it. So that's all. So tomorrow morning, we have a session on quantum gardening, which can also be called quantum rendering. But in that, we're actually going to break down all of the different current interpretations of quantum mechanics and how they actually tie into this Unicode that we're rosing. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. So I wrote that these two images are inverses of each other and they are key to realization, which is what we just did in that couple-minute process there. So who you are talking to is always who you are, and who you are talking to is always the image on the left. But from their first-person field of view, it's always appearing as the image on the right. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, glad that, yeah, it's very funny. Oh. I'm just really trying to be like as childlike and simple as possible with visualizing it and because it's just like that's the very thing that's plaguing physics currently. It's plaguing consciousness currently. It's just everything is pushed into these words and these concepts and these boxes and these mathematics and these concepts that then turn into 30-page papers that then you have to try to read out what they're trying to elaborate on this 30-page concept. But really, if you just put these two images up and you said that they are inverses of each other, you and everyone you are looking at is the image on the left. From the first-person view, all observers experience what the image is on the right. And from just that, you can be like, hey, oh, damn, that's pretty damn, okay, cool. So that's where we want to get to. We want to get to, being able to see in that way, if you can see and experience reality more and more in this way, it liberates you, it frees you, it turns everything into a singularity experiencing itself. It turns everything that you're rendering into some sort of more joyful rendering instead of solid and contracted rendering, you know? And you can always bring that levity around, that unified levity around with you everywhere, and it feels really good to be around it. Okay, so in other words, a cosmic vacuum is an entangled gravitational observer network. A cosmic vacuum is an entangled gravitational observer network that is holographically rendering experiences. So the medium is the conscious manifold, the message are the ideas and the codes, and the messengers are the double slit portals. So it's like bodies that are in a connectome or a connectome of entangled portals. Okay? And we've had a bunch of good visuals throughout this. So if you haven't seen the visuals yet, or if you are online, go and look at the visuals. You can go through the video and find those visuals and pause it and look at them for a while. And when you pause it and look at those visuals for a while, you'll see that, okay, this cosmic vacuum that's engulfing the earth, that the observer is like it's beached. It's like beached. So you have the sky, then you have the beach, and then you have the land. The earth is like the land. And then you have the beach, and then you have the sky. So the cosmic vacuum sees through the observer into a rendered hologram called an earth. And so we have a bunch of images that further make that clear. Oh. So we're going to get into this more in the second session. We're preparing you for it. So the generative vacuum, consciousness rendering itself, you have two primary principles in this cruciform physics that we're proposing. One is the indeterminate potential, and the other is the observer gravitationally rendering. But fundamentally, it's the uncertainty principle, or you can also call that indeterminism or indeterminacy. And then the other one is what we're calling the no-code display principle. So those two principles, fundamentally, they make a cruciform physics. One of them pays deep respect to Werner Heisenberg with the uncertainty principle, and the other one pays deep respect to Niels Bohr with what he called complementarity, but what we're going to sort of evolve that a little further, and we're going to just say it's the no-code display principle. And that those two things together, this is what Bohr was also hinting at, that they fundamentally, they make two orthogonal absolutes. So the fact that you can have infinite potential here's infinite potential. The other orthogonal absolute to infinite potential is rendering. You can only render one thing out of infinite potential at a time. You can't be at the gym and be eating at the restaurant at the same time. You have to be doing one of the two. So that's what's the no-code display principle. You can't, so put on a VR headset, you can't co-display going to the gym and going and eating at the restaurant at the same time. So that's what this no-code displaying is. So these two things are orthogonal absolutes, meaning you just can't go any further than the two things being perfect, full-bodied opposites of the other. So one's infinite potential, and the other is the actualization or the rendering of experiences, which requires a bottlenecking. You basically have to bottleneck infinite potential into a single rendered thing. So if I go, 50% chance we're all going to go eat after this, 10% chance that I'm going to drive home, 30% chance I'm going to go to the gym, to the sauna. I can't render all that shit at the same time. I just can't. There's no way you can. So you have to bottleneck all those probabilities into a single exclusively rendered timeline every single moment. So we're going to get into this more. So the vacuum cannot display more than one rendering at a time. It's a singular actualization. And on the other side is that uncertainty principle or indeterminacy, which is that the vacuum is creatively uncertain. It's an infinite superposition of possibilities. All right, so that gives you a good taste of what we're going to be talking about tomorrow with quantum gardening. We're going to be talking a lot about quantum mechanics tomorrow. We're going to be talking about all different kinds of interpretations of quantum mechanics. We're going to be integrating all of those different main interpretations of quantum mechanics into our Unicode, into our conscious manifold, into the vacuum holography. And it will be clear, it will be very visually clear where every piece fits. I'm really looking forward to showing that more tomorrow and exploring more that the cruciform physics as well. So again, thank you to our event sponsor, Guaranteed Community Advisors, Trusted Advisors in Sustainability. You can find out more by scanning that QR code or clicking the link in the bio below. Also, thank you to our room sponsor, Tax and Business Advisor. Same thing. Scan that or click the link in the bio below. And thank you for attending the Unicode seminar. We have a suggested daily donation, $33, $66, $111, whatever resonates for you, however much value you feel like you found from it. You can scan either that PayPal or that Venmo QR there. And if you can't, you can also click the seminar link below and it'll be there in the bio below, and it'll be there. And we're very excited. This was part 2 of vacuum holography of the first session, and it ended up being it's been 5 hours of theoretical physics and cosmology without getting to quantum gardening so far. And I did mention that the Unicode seminar was very heavily front-loaded on theoretical physics and cosmology. So we hope that we'll continue getting to the consciousness and the shamanism piece tomorrow as well. And then we have some of civilization and regeneration coming up after that. And we're looking forward to sharing that. So stay tuned. Drop a comment below with what you think. We would love to hear from you in the comment section about the seminar and how it has resonated, how this session specifically resonated. And yeah, we're really excited to get into this more tomorrow with quantum gardening. Okay, so thanks everyone for tuning in. Much love, and we will see you more soon. All right, bye.